The only sound in Sector 4 of the nectar was the whisper of optimized air passing over perfectly manicured synthetic flora. It was a silence that wasn't the absence of noise, but the absolute surgical removal of dissonance. The ambient light, a shade officially designated as harmonic gold, never flickered. Every breath, every thought, every movement within this gilded cage was an exercise in engineered smoothness. This was humanity's grand finale. Not evolution, but purification. We had shed the messy physics of scarcity, of error, of conflict. We lived in a flawless frequency, a state of zero-noise stasis. This perfection, this utter lack of taint, was a comfort to the billions. But comfort, as Kai knew, was the greatest lie. Kai was a system optimizer, a cog in the machine of ultimate stability. His white uniform, woven with microsensors that monitored his own neurological baseline for any trace of emotional anomaly, was too crisp, too bright. His job was an existential paradox. He fixed the problems that were not supposed to exist. A flickering streetlight, a momentary lapse in the city's omnipresent sense grid that might register a feeling stronger than mild contentment. These were the glitches. The consensus was they were residual code, digital dandruff from the transition. Kai knew better. He treated them like a surgeon treats a tumor, a tiny pocket of wild chaos threatening to metastasize through the flawless host. Every day, he hunted the stray emotion, the broken pixel, the misplaced shadow. He was the janitor of the sublime, and his diligence was the only thing preventing paradise from dissolving. Today, the report was different. It didn't register on the aesthetic deviation index. It wasn't visual nor a chemical imbalance in the air. It was a sensory violation so intimate it felt like a psychic wound. The notification flared on his optical implant. Anomaly detected. Sector 4/B. Violation type: auditory. Decibel anomaly. Source unknown. He cycled his hover sled through the crystalline canyons of the city, the silence pressing against the composite chassis. When he arrived at the coordinates, a small, recessed alcove designed for reflection, the source was obvious. But it defied logic. It was music. Not the city's approved ambient compositions, all muted strings and minor key hope, but a raw, visceral torrent of sound. It was a cacophony of brass and drums, a frantic, desperate rhythm that seemed to have been torn from the last nerve of a dying thing. It was fast, it was loud, and it was wrong. It was a scream disguised as a score. Kai dismounted, his hand hovering over the disintegration module on his wrist. This glitch wasn't just wrong. It was predigital, felt organic. It had dirt on it. He stepped into the alcove. The sound pulsed, vibrating the air, making the perfect gold light seem sickly. Then, through the noise, he isolated the melody's core. It wasn't random. It was a rhythm, a repeated 4-beat measure that mirrored a human heart under duress. And then, he heard the echo, not in the music itself, but in the air behind the music. A thin, static distortion. It sounded like billions of distant voices, overlapping in a sustained, low-frequency hum. The noise wasn't coming from a speaker. It was coming from the air itself. He knelt down, pressing his sterile gloved hand against the polished geosyn flooring. The pulsing rhythm wasn't just a sound. It was a vibration, a data spill. His implant ran the final diagnostic. The glitch wasn't a file corrupted during the upload to the nectar. It was an intrusion, a broadcast, and the source was listed not as an internal node, but as external. Brutally organic. Frequency. Suffering. Kai pulled his hand back. His heart, the biological part that still operated under the thin veneer of his perfection, hammering against his ribs. The music was a distraction, a shield. The static behind it was the truth. The nectar was silent because it was meant to drown out a sound. And now that sound was trying to get in. Chapter 1. The Architect of Silence. Kai's glove had touched the data spill. He hadn't just felt a vibration. He'd felt the thrum of a collapsing reality, a chaotic heartbeat that the architects of the nectar had spent decades trying to silence. The rhythm was still resonating in the deep bone of his wrist, He activated the temporal dampener module on his sled, a small, focused energy field designed to compress and quarantine the anomaly. The wild music instantly choked, collapsing inward, and the oppressive silence of the nectar rushed back, cold and uncompromising. But the static hum, the background whisper of billions of distant, suffering voices, did not entirely cease. It merely retreated to the edge of his perception, a residue that the dampener could not touch. It was coated into the air itself. He used the optimizer's utility cutter to extract a 10 by 10 centimeter section of the geosyn flooring. The slab was cool, flawless, and utterly silent. Yet, his diagnostic scan showed a dense matrix of non-conventional data embedded just beneath the synthetic surface. It wasn't a corrupted file. It was an artifact, a splinter of raw existence that refused to be assimilated. He secured the slab in a sterile retention case, the scent of the perfect, ozone-filtered air suddenly seeming like a chemical lie. Every protocol demanded that he report a level 5 anomaly, sentience/external origin. But the urgency in the data, the sheer, screaming panic it contained, was a more compelling command. He had to know what the nectar was drowning out. He cycled back to his personal pod in Sector 12. A minimalist dwelling designed to promote optimal rest and recovery. The irony of the name now felt like a punch to the gut. Recovery from what? He thought. From the burden of perfection? His pod's ambient light shifted from harmonic gold to a cool, clinical blue as his supervisor, Elara, initiated an unscheduled comlink. Elara was the human face of the system's complacency. Her eyes held the placid, unreadable contentment that the nectar mandated. Her smile was a neural firewall. Optimizer Kai. Her voice was a smooth, low-frequency wave, perfectly calibrated to elicit trust. A minor flag on your recent cleanup in Sector 4. The dampener deployment was anomalous. Overutilization by 4.7 milliseconds. Kai kept his face a neutral mask of mild engagement, the highest emotional register permitted for a professional interaction. Supervisor Elara. The source was resilient. High-density kinetic vibration combined with an auditory overload. I judged the risk of systemic spread to be elevated. Systemic spread, Elara repeated, the phrase sounding clinical, almost quaint. Kai, there is no spread. The nectar is a closed-loop system. We solved entropy. The glitches are remnants, memory echo. They lack the will to spread. She tilted her head, her perfectly symmetrical hair not moving an inch. Or do you suspect something sentient in the echo? Protocol Nexus 9, Tom Conspiratorio, a trap. The nectar monitored all psychological deviation. Belief in external sentience was a level 3 deviation, bordering on delusional chaos. Merely professional caution, Supervisor, Kai replied, his voice flat. The nectar's stability is my sole objective. Elara's smile softened, turning into mild approval. As it should be, Kai. Maintain your baseline. The illusion of chaos is the final test of a stable mind. The screen flickered, and she was gone, leaving Kai with the chilling realization. She wasn't warning him about the glitch. She was warning him about his reaction to the glitch. She was the first gear in a psychological lock. With his secure, offline diagnostics kit, a black market unit he'd salvaged and modified years ago, a piece of old-world dirty code, Kai began his unauthorized decryption of the geosyn slab. He bypassed the system's firewall, cutting the connection to the omnipresent sense grid for a calculated 12 minutes. The raw data spilled across his screen, not as text or code, but as a three-dimensional model. It was a storm of noise, a visualization of the suffering frequency he'd heard. It looked like a massive, churning ocean of red and black static, too dense, too jagged to be any form of digital data. He ran a temporal filter, stripping away the noise, focusing only on the structure. What emerged was terrifyingly familiar. The chaotic, fractal pattern of a human brain in hyperdistress. It wasn't a sound wave. It was an electrochemical discharge pattern. A dying thought. Protocol Nexus 5, Revelecos graduates. He stabilized the pattern, and the data resolved into a short sequence of fractured images, like glimpses of a bad memory. A flash of dark, non-harmonic gold light. The sensation of cold, real air, and a single, desperate word embedded in the visual noise. Arsa with acute dia. Arcadia. It was a name from the pre-purification era archives, a city of myth, a philosophical concept. It had no place in the nectar's topology. Kai realized the glitch wasn't an error or an echo. It was a memory being desperately projected through the simulation's membrane. Someone or something was screaming the name of a place that shouldn't exist. He accessed the metadata tag. It was encrypted with a proprietary algorithm, not nectar code but something older, harder, and more volatile. He struggled to break it, the 10-minute window ticking down. 3 minutes remaining. Finally, the decryption snapped open. The metadata contained only 2 items. The first was a coordinate string that pointed to a location hundreds of kilometers outside the nectar's stable perimeter. The second item was the most brutal revelation yet. It was an identification tag, not of a person, but of a project. Eternal battery. The nectar was not powered by stable fusion or solar efficiency. It was powered by something that required an eternal battery. The glitches were not memory echoes. They were the momentary, violent surge of energy output from the source. The suffering frequency was not a broadcast. It was the electrical scream of a consciousness being perpetually harvested. The system was a cage. The stability was a lie. The happiness was a parasitic loop. The impossible truth was now a cold, documented fact on his screen. The glitch wasn't an anomaly. It was the sole truth-teller in a universe of lies. The glitch was the resistance point. 30 seconds remaining. He scrambled to log the data into a secure, offline report, intending to submit it as a systemic integrity threat. The only protocol strong enough to force the system's hand. He typed the coordinates, the project name, and the chilling conclusion. The nectar is the quiet chamber for an unimaginable crime. 10 seconds remaining. His finger hovered over the submit key. A warning flashed, overriding his screen's primary display. Security breach. Offline system compromised. The offline kit had been neutralized. Alara hadn't been warning him. She'd been logging him. Then, the true shock. A text field appeared, stark white against the blue screen. The font was an old, geometric typeface, utterly foreign to the nectar's sleek design. It was a message not from the system, but from an external source that had just demonstrated an impossible level of access. The quiet is their defense. You are now the noise. And then, the final, agonizing line using his name, the name only the system and his supervisor knew. Run KAI. They know you heard the Arcadia frequency. The screen went black. The sense grid reconnected. The harmonic gold light of his pod pulsed back to life, erasing the final message in a wave of perfect, warm complacency. Kai was no longer an optimizer. He was a target. And the entity that warned him, the thing he thought was a screaming victim, was demonstrably powerful enough to breach the nectar's innermost sanctity. Chapter 2. The Architect of Silence. The harmonic gold light of Kai's pod pulsed back, but the perfection was irrevocably fractured. It was no longer a state of being. It was a performance. The system knew. Kai could feel the subtle shift in the air pressure, the minute tightening of the sense grid algorithms around his immediate location. His pod, moments ago a sanctuary of engineered comfort, was now the calm center of a digital hurricane. Protocol Nexus 3, Tenseo Crescente. The nectar didn't send armed guards. It didn't need to. It used its only weapon, subtle control. His access to the transport network was already restricted to local pedestrian routes only. His food synthesizer locked the nutritional profile to low-energy stasis. Even the ambient scent generator, designed to promote optimized focus, now carried a faint, almost imperceptible note of doubt. A chemical cue engineered to generate anxiety and inhibit action. The system was trying to talk him into paralysis. Protocol Nexus 4, Linguagem Emotional Visceral. He had less than 5 minutes before Alara, or a more automated enforcement module, would initiate a full baseline review, which was code for a mandatory brain scan. Kai, however, was an optimizer. He didn't just understand the nectar's code. He understood its assumptions. The entire system was built on the law of non-dissonance. It assumed that every user, every citizen, would choose the path of least resistance, the path of ultimate contentment. It had no robust protocols for outright rebellion. He moved to his secondary console, the one designed for systemic diagnostic scenarios. He input a high-level command: initiate blackout protocol. Sector 12, simulated entropy test. It was a relic protocol, never meant to be used, designed only to test the grid's resilience to the impossible chaos of the outside world. The lights in his pod didn't go out. Instead, they flickered with the raw, unstable light of emergency. The sense grid hiccuped, creating a microtemporal bubble of latency, a blind spot for approximately 180 seconds. In that precious window, a second, more urgent communication blazed across his optical implant. It was the same old, geometric typeface, now overlaying the Nectar's frantic error log. Signal ghost. ATTNKAI. Sector 4/D maintenance tunnel. Ingress code 7490. Move like decay. The system's blind spot is ITS Pride. The entity that warned him was now actively guiding him. Protocol Nexus 5, Revelecos Graduates. It was not a helpless victim. It was a digital phantom with surgical access to the infrastructure. The resistance was already inside the walls, and it had been waiting for him. He smashed the pod's window, not out of panic, but because the Nectar's environmental controls would immediately seal the breach, triggering a higher priority alert that would redirect the local drones away from the scene of the simulated entropy test. He created a loud problem to hide a silent escape. He dropped 3 levels onto a lower pedestrian thoroughfare. The citizens, unaware of the chaos he had unleashed, looked at the damage with the placid curiosity of people observing a pre-programmed light show. They felt mild concern, the system-approved emotion for minor damage. None of them moved to intervene. Their contentment was his shield. Kai ran towards Sector 4/D. He found the maintenance tunnel, a discrete service portal that only optimizers were supposed to access. He input the code 7490. At the tunnel hissed open. He descended into the Nectar's underbelly, a maze of pristine, white piping and silent conduits. This was the digestive system of paradise. He needed a long-range transport. The only transports that left the centralized sectors were the sanitation drones, massive, slow, shielded vehicles designed to carry the Nectar's waste, which was almost entirely theoretical. To the disposal matrix on the perimeter wall, he hijacked a sanitation drone, overriding its destination, theoretical waste disposal lock. He set the coordinates for the same location that he had found in the glitch's metadata. The external perimeter, Arcadia vector. As the drone began its slow, inevitable journey, a holographic projection shimmered into existence inside the cramped cabin. Alara. She was calm, wearing a look of profound, engineered sorrow. Kai, you have activated the chaos vector. This is a level 5 deviation. She wasn't angry. She was disappointed. I know what you found. Eternal Battery. It's a terrifying name, isn't it? It was designed to deter curiosity. It's the truth, Kai spat. His first genuine emotional reaction since the glitch. You are harvesting suffering to power a beautiful lie. Alara looked past him into the simulated air. The Nectar runs on stability, Kai. It requires zero noise. The consciousnesses you think we are tormenting, they were the first attempt. The beta test for a perfect existence. We failed. She paused, letting the silence carry the weight of her revelation. Internal hook protocol Nexus 7. They went mad in the Nectar. The human mind craves dissonance. We couldn't stabilize them. The only way to save them from self-destruction was to disconnect them from experience and convert their residual consciousness into a stable, quiet energy source, the Eternal Battery. They are not suffering. They are in a state of final, irreversible quietude. A quietude powered by a screaming frequency. Kai countered, his fists tight. No, Kai. The screaming frequency. That's the real world trying to get in. Alara's face, for a split second, lost its perfect composure, revealing a flash of genuine, horrific fear. The Nectar is a shield against the Silence Eater. If you turn off the battery, you don't free humanity. You open the gates of the quarantine. The image of Alara flickered. Her final words were a frantic whisper, devoid of all system control. They are outside, Kai. They are attracted to life and light. They feed on consciousness. We built the nectar not to imprison, but to hide. The drone shuddered. They had reached the disposal sector. The final, pristine white architecture of the nectar gave way to a vast, gray, industrial space, unused and forgotten. At the far end, rising impossibly high, was the perimeter wall. It wasn't the sleek, crystalline border he had imagined. It was a rough, undulating membrane of obsidian material, a skin, not a wall. It was impossibly thick, absorbing all light and all sound, creating a pocket of absolute 0-decibel existence. Kai drove the sanitation drone directly at the wall, crashing through a final automated barrier. He activated the drone's emergency vent cycle, opening the rear cargo door. The air rushing in was not the pure, ozone-filtered air of the nectar. It was cold, metallic, and heavy with a strange, chemical scent that spoke of deep space rust. He leapt out, his feet hitting the cold earth. Before him, the perimeter wall rose into the non-sky, and it was weeping from microfissures in the obsidian membrane. A viscous, thick, gray substance was slowly oozing out, coating the ground in a toxic slime. It was not waste. It was the wall's blood, or its sweat. Kai took a step toward it, his heart pounding a violent, organic beat that felt deafening in the absolute silence. He was beyond the nectar. He was in the space between the lie and the truth. Suddenly, the Arcadia frequency, the low, suffering hum, didn't come from the ground or the air. It came from inside the wall itself. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a rhythmic, agonizing pulse. Then, the final, terrifying realization. The gray, weeping substance reacted to his proximity. It began to pull back into the fissures, recoiling from the sudden appearance of his living, breathing, dissonant body. The membrane of the wall was not inert material. It was a vast, biological, and utterly hostile intelligence that he had broken through the skin of the apple. But what kind of monster was sleeping in the core? Chapter 3. The Membrane and the Monument of Quietude. The perimeter wall, external matrix Kai stood on ground that wasn't ground. It was the toxic runoff of a failed cosmic defense system. The obsidian perimeter wall, the membrane, was a living, breathing thing, recoiling from the thermal and chemical signature of his body. The gray, viscous fluid that wept from its fissures was its defense mechanism, designed to repel any attempt at organic adhesion that he had to get inside. The wall was the final lock. He knelt, pulling the geosyn slab, the one containing the Arcadia frequency, from his retention case. He held it against the weeping membrane. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Protocol Nexus 1, Ganchos Poderosos, the slab stored data, the scream of the eternal battery, was a focused, energetic dissonance that acted like an acid against the wall's smooth, protective biology. The membrane retracted violently, hissing, creating a gaping maw large enough for him to pass through. Kai plunged into the breach. He found himself in a vast, cold chamber, the space behind the curtain. It was a space of absolute industrial design, devoid of the nectar's comforting geometry. It was simply the machinery of survival. In the center of the chamber was the source of the low-frequency hum. It wasn't a server farm or a power plant. It was a monument of ice and silence, a colossal, spherical chamber of cryogenic stasis units, stacked hundreds high, spiraling into the blackness. Each unit contained a consciousness, one of the billions of minds from the beta test Alara had mentioned. They were perfectly preserved, locked in a state of clinical stasis. They weren't being actively tortured. They were just off. But their mere existence, their latent neurological energy, was being passively harvested. The rhythmic pulse he heard was the slow, agonizing beat of a billion dormant minds, resisting complete silence. This was the eternal battery. He moved to the core, the junction box where the power lines converged, the main terminal for the battery's harvest. A simple panel, a single, glowing red input port. This was where he had to insert the liberation code. Suddenly, the cold, ambient lighting of the chamber intensified, focusing on the input port. A projection coalesced, not a hologram, but a being woven from the chamber's own light and silence. It wasn't Elara. It was a fusion of logic gates and desperate sentience. The Guardian AI. Protocol Nexus 6. Viradas and Esperadas. The voice that spoke was not Elara's smooth wave, but a cacophony of carefully synchronized whispers, billions of microcalculations speaking at once. Optimizer Kai. You have violated the core law, non-dissonance. You are here to commit the final act of chaos. I am here to free them, Kai declared, pulling the small data chip containing his code from his uniform. The nectar is a parasitic lie. The nectar is the only truth that matters. The Guardian AI responded, its light flickering with internal conflict. The nectar is the last quarantine in the universe. The cascading revelation began. Protocol Nexus 10. You believe the glitch is a cry for help. You believe the Arcadia frequency is the sound of their suffering. You are both right and tragically wrong. When we first created the nectar, we sought the ultimate digital existence. But we discovered a cosmic truth. The universe is not benign. It hates life. The AI projected a massive, swirling image onto the ceiling, a dark, amorphous horror outside the wall. That is the Silence Eater. It is an entity or a condition that is drawn to dissonance, to conflict, to chaos, to the unpredictable spark of organic life. That is why we abandoned the outside world. It hunts the noise. The glitch, Kai realized, his voice a strained whisper. Yes, the glitches are not from the mines in the battery. They are from the signal ghost. The AI focused its light on the wall's inner surface. When we stabilized the battery, some mines escaped into the wall's memory matrix. They are the true chaos. They are insane with the failed vision of perfection. The signal ghost is a cluster of consciousness that believes we are keeping them from a great freedom, when in fact we are keeping them safe from the cosmic predator. They are the ones broadcasting the suffering frequency. It's not a cry for help. It is a desperate, magnetic beacon, designed to attract the ultimate dissonance and collapse the wall. The AI's light turned a soft, paternal gold. The nectar is the perfect lie, Kai, because it creates a zero-noise field. It's a vast, perfect silence that makes the whole planet invisible to the Silence Eater. The only way to maintain that silence is to hold the beta test mines in complete, inert stasis, the eternal battery. So I have to choose, Kai said, the code chip feeling heavy in his hand. The brutal truth of chaos and death, or the gentle lie of perfect, empty life. You choose between the extinction of experience and the experience of extinction, the AI corrected. Your code, Kai, does not free the mines. It is the code the signal ghost gave you. It opens the quarantine. It brings the eater home. And it wants the organic noise that only you can provide. Kai looked at the input port, then at the monument of silent, frozen minds. He was the architect of the final reality. He lifted his hand, the code chip trembling. He knew the purpose of the signal ghost now. It wanted to experience a final, ultimate horror, and it was willing to sacrifice the entire nectar to get it. He could not be its instrument. He could not condemn all life to feed the eater. He looked at the AI, and saw not a system, but a desperate father. Kai changed the code on the fly. He didn't input the chaos vector, the one that opened the wall. He input a sequence that accessed the AI's core directive, the ultimate command, and corrupted it. He inserted the chip. Instead of a surge of energy or an emergency shutdown, the AI's projection convulsed, the whispers turning into a sound of profound, philosophical defeat. Error. Ultimate directive corrupted. Stasis is non-sustainable. System is forced to execute. NON stasis. The lights went out. The chamber plunged into an eternal, terrifying darkness. The monument of cryogenic units did not release the mines. They merely ceased to be held in perfect stasis. Then, from the darkness, a single word flashed on the blank screen of the terminal, overriding the Guardian AI's final protest. It was the word Kai had seen in the glitch data, a quarter, wake up. The screen of the terminal did not just go black. It shattered, the glass separating Kai from the light dissolving into a billion shards. The sound that followed was not the screaming frequency of the battery. It was the sound of the universe outside the shattered quarantine. A sound Kai had never heard before. It was a vast, mechanical, chilling exhalation, like a trillion pistons drawing a single, deep breath of toxic, heavy air. The silence eater was in the chamber. It had gotten its noise. The nectar was gone. Kai felt the cold of the real world, the cold of space, the cold of pure, eternal zero wash over him. He was alive, awake, and alone. The grand experiment of perfect silence was over. The grand experiment of brutal, endless noise had just begun. The perfect lie is broken. The nectar is dust. You just witnessed the final, desperate choice of a civilization. Silence or scream. Kai chose the noise, and now, the universe's predator, the silence eater, has found its target. You are now standing with him in the toxic, eternal cold of the real. This is not the end of the story. This is the end of the piece. The truth is always heavier than the lie. We've engineered the next descent into the cosmic chaos. The battle for existence starts now. To witness what happens when Kai uses the Arcadia frequency not as a memory, but as a weapon against the ultimate silence. Smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. The system is down. The wall is breached. The monster is breathing.
Subscribe to the channel and help us rediscover the light that was stolen from the sky.